All right, in this lesson, we're going to set up users, groups, and policies. So we'll start out by, from our domain controller, we'll go to the Tools tab, and then what we will select is Active Directory Users and Computers. Select eCore, we'll do the drop down, and then we'll select Users. As you can see, there are users that are already built into it, but there's also groups built in there in the same users folder. So what we can do now is create a new folder called groups just by right-clicking the eCore, selecting new, and then selecting organizational unit. So what we'll name that new organizational unit is groups. Then we'll select OK. Now what we can do is go back to users, and if we filter them by selecting type, we see we got all the groups together, so we can sort of highlight all the groups and then just drag it into the groups folder. Select yes. That just makes it a little neater so that we only have users in the users folder, and by creating that groups folder, we can have all the groups in their own folder. First thing we're going to do is create another administrator account. So we're going to right-click the administrator and then select copy. Then what we'll do is go ahead and fill the fields out. So this administrator is going to be named Tyrone Wellick. And the login name will just be the first initial followed by the last name. And then we can click next. For the password, give it a password. Okay, so normally you would force the user to change the password the next time they logged on, but we're not going to do that for the lab purposes. And we're also just going to set it up so the password never expires. Once again, those are not best practices if this was in a real environment. However, for our lab, this will work just fine. So we click next, and then we can select finish. And you see the new user, Tyrell Wellick, has just appeared. Now we want to copy administrator again, because what we're going to do is create a service account. So we're going to call this, first name we'll give it SQL, last name we'll give it service. And the login name will just be SQL service. And then we will click next, select next. Then we want to give it a password. And the same thing, we won't have it change, and we'll make it the password to where it never expires. So we'll click next, and then we'll select finish. So now we're going to right click SQL Service, go to the properties, and under description, I'm just going to type that is the password, is password 4, which obviously is not good practice to put the actual password in the description, but I can't speak for why IT folks do some things. So now what we want to do is add a user by right-clicking in the white space in the area where all the users are listed. Select new and go down to user. Now we'll fill in the fields. So the first user I'm creating is Philip Price. Sticking with the Mr. Robot theme. And then give it a password. Once again, not going to make the user change the password, and it will never expire. Then click Next. Click Finish. So now we see we have another user. So we'll go ahead and create another user just by right-clicking, new user. This one will be Terry Colby. Click Next. Password never expires. You gotta fill the password in first. So give it a password. Then select Next. Then select Finish. So now we've added 2 users to the group. For now, this is all we'll set up, but we can add more users later. So the next thing we want to do is to set up a file share. So we can go ahead and close out the users and computer section, and we'll select on the left-hand side, file storage and services. We want to highlight shares. And from the task drop down, we want to select new shares. And then just select next. We can select next again. So now we need to give it a name. So we're going to call this share Steel Mountain. Then select next. We want to allow caching of the share, and then we select next. We can select next again. And lastly, we can just select create. Now that's completed, we can go ahead and select close. Now what we want to do is configure a service principal name. So basically, we want to finish setting up that SQL Service account that we created earlier. So we can open the command prompt as administrator, and we'll type in a command. So type in CMD in the search bar. The command prompt pops up there. Let's right-click so we can run it as administrator. So the command that we want to run is set spn -a ecore / SQL service dot ecore dot local :60111 ecore / SQL service. When we run that, we were able to update that object and create the service principal name. Now we could check it again if we ran set spn -t ecore .local /q ****. We run it, and now we can basically see the SPN is created. Now what we want to do is to set up a group policy. All right, we can close the command prompt. So to set up a group policy, we can just start typing group, and we see group policy management. So we select that. Okay, so from the drop down, we get from the forest, we go to domains, and then we get ecore local. We can right click ecore local and select create a GPO in this domain and link it here. We can name the GPO disable Windows Defender, then select OK. Okay, so by looking at the drop down, we can select the name of the new GPO, disable Windows Defender, and then select OK. We can right click the policy and select edit. Then we can drop down the computer configuration, policies, administrative template, Windows network or Windows component. Then we can select Microsoft Defender antivirus. Go full screen so we can see this. So we select Windows Defender antivirus, and over on the right side, we see turn off Defender's antivirus. Double click. From there, we will click enable and click OK. We can close the group policy editor. And we can right click disable Windows Defender and select enforced. Now we have a group policy that disables Windows Defender. Next thing we want to do is to set a static IP address. So to do that, the first thing we need to do, once again, we need a command prompt. We'll run ipconfig. That's the current IP address is 10.0.1.14, and that is within that IP range that we did configure on the DHCP service on that network adapter. What we want to do now is make this a static IP address by right-clicking the network icon in the tray and then selecting Network and Internet Settings. From here, go down to change adapter options, right click Ethernet, go to properties, select the IPv4 and select properties. Now what we can do is make it use the following IP address. And we're going to give it the same IP address that it was before. So it is 0.1.14. This will just ensure that the IP address does not get changed. So we're going to use the DNS service that we just set up on this domain controller earlier. So we'll be using the loopback IP address of 127.0.0.1. And then we can select OK, a slight change to the settings. So the IP address is correct, 10.0.1.14. The subnet mask is correct. However, we had forgot to set the default gateway. So the default gateway in this case is 10.0.1.1. That is pointing to the adapter on the router, and that will be our default gateway for all the machines in this network segment. And then we will go ahead and use our own IP address as the preferred DNS server, and then the loopback IP address as the secondary DNS server. Okay, then we can close it. So congratulations, now you've set up users, groups, and policies, and we assigned a static IP address to the domain controller. So in the next exercise, we will join the Windows VMs to the domain.